Hello everyone, welcome to week 5. So we are really about a third of the way through the semester right now. This week we're going to talk about strategic issues, and I'm going to give you a chance in the discussion board to do two things. And the first thing I'm going to have you do is talk about the organization that you are using for your term project a little bit, and then in the context of defining strategic issues, I'm going to have you think about some possibly strategic issues that organization might have. And don't be scared off by that. I don't expect you to know everything about the organization right now, but more on that in just a minute. Well, here's where we're at right now. We're in week 5, like I said, and this week we're going to talk about how identification of what we call strategic issues flows from an understanding of mandates, stakeholders, and the environment. And as you recall, we've talked about that. And so we're going to talk about how the understanding that you develop about the organization in terms of its mandates, who its stakeholders are, and the environment in which it operates, how those things actually lead you to understand strategic issues. Now we are at the stage where all of you have turned in your proposals, but let me put a pitch out there right now. In fact, what I just said isn't accurate. Not everyone has turned in your proposal. So if you're one of those people, if you don't have a grade for your proposal, if it's just blank, it means I didn't get it. I graded all the proposals that I got. If you have not turned in your proposal, or if you believe you turned it in and somehow Blackboard didn't accept it, please contact me immediately. If you haven't turned it in, it's going to be late and will be docked for being quite late. But I do need a proposal from you because I do need to know what your term project is going to be all about. I also want to remind you that we have a couple of assignments coming up. The first is going to be the short analysis essay, which is due in a week on September 26th, Saturday, September 26th. That is a stakeholder analysis. And so it's going to be somewhat similar to the discussion board we had on stakeholder analysis. I'm going to have you use a slightly different depiction of stakeholders, but look at the assignment itself, and what I'm going to have you do is write a short paper on identifying stakeholders for the city of Omaha. And based on everybody's understanding of stakeholders that was evidenced in the discussion, I think most of you should have a not an easy time, but you should be able to do that assignment quite handily. And then the second thing is going to be that your term project interview plan, which is going to be due October 10th. And recall, part of your term project is to interview a key person in the organization. We're going to spend a week here coming up on developing interview questions. So don't sweat that right now. We are going to spend some time with that. So what do we mean by strategic issues? Well, you know, you've seen this diagram. It's in your textbook. Remember, I said that really strategic thinking and strategic planning is all about understanding A, where you are, B, where you want to be, and C, how you get there. And look what's right in the middle of that diagram, strategic issues. So doing those things, understanding where you are, understanding where you want to be, and understanding how you get there, that's all about understanding the strategic issues that face the organization for the near term and for the future. So how do all the things fit together that we've talked about so far? So first, recall we talked about mandates. You have to understand mandates. Mandates are those things that the organization must do, whether formal or informal. They are things that are demanded of the organization. And then second, you have to understand stakeholders. And recall we talked about this. Who are the people or groups of people that are making demands on the organization. And we couched that in terms of this power interest grid where we said, some people have a lot of interest and a lot of power. Some people have a lot of interest and low power. Some people have a lot of power and low interest, or some people have low interest and low power. And we grouped people into those categories. But it was just a way of understanding who the stakeholders of the organization might be. That is, people who make demands on the organization. And then third, you have to understand the internal and the external environment in which the organization operates. And so we did that through the vehicle of this strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats or challenges exercise. So when you understand the SWOT, you understand what the organization is facing. And so all those things combined, those understandings of these elements, they present us with a group of problem statements about the organization, or what we might call strategic issues. So this is just another depiction of this. This building block view of strategic planning is also in your book. So look, at the bottom tier, we've done most of those things. We did a stakeholder assessment, we did a mandate analysis, we did a SWOT. And so those lead up to this understanding of strategic issues. And so it is, in fact, a building block approach. And I would say that the things we're hitting in the class are in my mind, the very most important things in strategic planning. You do have to understand who the stakeholders are. You do have to understand what your mandates are, and you do have to understand the environment to even get to the point of understanding strategic issues. But what is a strategic issue? So you notice I quote Bryson here, and let me just make a quick aside. I gave you a PDF of the entire chapter 6 of Bryson's larger book, but I pay attention to the pages I told you to look at. You can scan most of the chapter, but there are several pages that I want you to really look at carefully. The reason I gave you the whole chapter is because this chapter is going to be very helpful for those of you who are doing strategic issue identification for your term project. It's a very good source for you to use for that exercise. But a strategic issue is a fundamental policy question or challenge affecting an organization's mandates, mission and values, product or service level or mix, clients or users, cost, financing, organization, or management. So it's fundamental, meaning that it's of importance to the entire organization. And it affects its mandates. So there's that mandates again. It affects its clients or users. What are clients or users? They're stakeholders, right? It affects things like financing, organization, and management. So a strategic issue affects the overall organization, and in this way it differs from what we could call operational issues. But how can we tell the difference? And so one way of doing this is what Bryson calls a litmus test. And this is on page 143 and 144 of your textbook. So what I'd like you to do right now is grab that book while you're watching this presentation, and we'll go through this a little bit. So if you look at page 143 and 144, you all have it open, right? So what you see is that an issue can be primarily operational, both operational and strategic, or primarily strategic. And there's 11 questions to ask about this issue that you've just written down based on your understanding of the organization. So let me just say this right now. If you read this litmus test, it sort of appears that it's applying to a larger organization, right? So for example, a nonprofit that has a board of directors and maybe several employees and several volunteers. It's really possible that you have a nonprofit of one person. In fact, there are a lot of nonprofits of one person. So if you are an army of one, so to speak, in your nonprofit, then every issue could be a strategic issue, and it becomes more difficult to separate operational issues from strategic issues. But in general, um, operational issues in a larger organization are those that can be handled by a lower level of leadership within the organization. For example, if your organization owns a facility and you need to replace the light bulbs, that's not a strategic issue. That's an operational issue, and somebody at a lower level of the organization doesn't need to ask permission to change light bulbs. But if your facility has a bad wiring system, if the electrical power system in the organization is underpowered for what you have to do, that could be a strategic issue, because you could end up having to spend a lot of your budget completely replacing your electrical system. So that is how we differentiate between operational and strategic issues. But anyway, I'm not going to read all these questions, but there are 11 of them. And so what I'd like you to do is look at this on pages 143 and 144. And so what you see is you answer most of these questions with a yes/no answer. So for example, number 1, would this issue, if put forward, make it onto the agenda of the organization's policy board? So imagine a large organization with a board. Does this issue need to be considered by the board? If the answer is no, if it's the light bulb changing, then it's probably an operational issue. But if the answer is yes, we have to replace the entire electrical system, we have to replace all the panels, we have to replace all the wiring, we have to get more 220 power flowing through the building, for example, and it's going to cost us $100,000 to hire the electrical company to do that, then it's probably a strategic issue. It's one that the board is going to have to consider. So look at, for example, question 5. And if you have your book open, how large is your organization's financial risk or opportunity from this issue? So what Bryson does here is he says, well, if it's 10% of the budget, it's an operational issue. If it's 25% or more of the budget, it's a strategic issue. That's okay for him to say that, but I do want to tell you that's completely arbitrary. 10% of your budget, depending on your budget, might be a pretty big chunk. 25% of your budget, depending on your budget, might not be a really big chunk if you have a gigantic endowment. So I would say that is really dependent, again, on the organization. However, it's a good rule of thumb. So look at those questions. You see we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and number 6 has all these substatements to it, which are very interesting questions in and of themselves. And then we have questions 7 through 11. So number 11 is really interesting, and this does come up for organizations. How sensitive or charged is the issue relative to community, social, political, religious, and cultural values? Some of you know this, that the Boy Scouts of America just kind of went through a change of heart on their acceptance of gay scout leaders. And this, I would say, would constitute a strategic issue for them. It wasn't made locally. It wasn't made ad hoc. They thought about it a long time, and it really was a strategic issue. And so that's a good example of how a sensitive value change might affect an organization. So how do we use the litmus test? Well, here's just a real simple way that I can think of doing this. When you're in your organization, what I would do if I was starting a strategic plan in an organization and they said they didn't want to go through all the steps, all 10 steps, I would say, hey, look, here's what we need to do. I want us to understand our mandates. I want us to understand our stakeholders, and I want us to understand the environment that we work in. Based on that, we're going to come up with a list of issues. And just on a piece of paper, I would write down all those issues, even if they seem trivial. And then what you need to do is apply this litmus test to each of these issues. So again, if you were doing this, if you looked at page 143 again, it says issue. So you'd write down the issue. And then you apply this litmus test to that issue. And based on that, you have to decide, based on your answer to those 11 questions, is this primarily operational? Is it both operational and strategic? Or is it primarily strategic? And that's really how you would use this litmus test. Okay, so for this week, in the discussion board, here's what I want you to do. You're going to use the organization that you're writing about for your term project. And you're going to use your current understanding of the organization right now, which I will tell you is probably incomplete because you haven't had a chance to interview your key member yet, and you may not know a lot about it from your own research. You know a few things about the organization, and that's okay. So for what I'm asking you to do this week, I'm not expecting you to know everything there is to know about the organization. I'd be really surprised if you do. I'm asking you to do this as a thought exercise, really. So on the discussion board, I'm going to ask you to tell us the name of the organization and what their mission is. And you can talk about, if you want to talk about the person you're interviewing, that's okay too. You don't have to use their name. You could just say, I'm interviewing the person who's the development director or whatever. And then, based on your current, which again is tentative, understanding, I'm going to ask you to suggest 3 issues you think this organization might have. Just from your own ideas about the organization, what issues do you think it might have? And then discuss, based on thinking about the litmus test, whether you think these issues are operational, strategic, or somewhere in between. And so that's the discussion board this week. I do want you to comment back to each other about your organizations and about the strategic issues. And in no way do I expect you to bias your term project by going through this exercise. In fact, if you come up with 3 issues during this particular discussion exercise about your organization, and as you do your research, you say, well, those really aren't issues at all, that's okay. This is just a thinking exercise for you to get you in the mode of talking and thinking about your organization. So that's it for the week. That's all on strategic issues. And thanks for listening. I'll talk to you all next week.